There was a time when the sound of Australia was steel being hit. Newcastle, Whyalla, Cockatoo Island in the middle of Sydney Harbour. Thousands of men in leather aprons and flash goggles, bending plate, welding seams, building ships that were launched with a bottle and a cheer. The trade at the heart of that noise had a name: Boilermaker. Today, the noise is gone, the yards are gone, and the country that once built ocean-going ships now struggles to find enough welders to fix a bridge. That did not just happen, it was decided, with dates. And this is when and by whom. First, understand what a Boilermaker actually was, because the word has almost vanished. A Boilermaker was the man who worked heavy steel plate. He read the drawings, marked out the plate, cut it, rolled it, bent it, welded it, and turned flat metal into pressure vessels, ship hulls, bridge girders, storage tanks, rail wagons. It was a 4-year apprenticeship, an indenture, a legal document signed by the boy, his father, and the company. 4 years of day work and night school at the Tech. At the end of it, a young man held a ticket that said he could build anything out of steel, anywhere in the world. That ticket was a passport, and in the Australia of the 1950s and 60s, it was as good as a university degree. Better, some would say, because a Boilermaker never had to ask what his work was for. He could point at it. There it is, that ship, that bridge, that tank farm, mine. The great shipyards were the cathedrals of the trade, and they were also its schools. Whyalla in South Australia, run by BHP, launched its first ship in 1941 and built more than 60 vessels over 3 decades. The State Dockyard at Newcastle, Cockatoo Island Dockyard, building for the Navy since before the First World War. Evans Deakin in Brisbane. Each yard ran its own apprentice training, hundreds of boys at a time, Boilermakers, fitters, shipwrights, coppersmiths. A yard was not just a workplace, it was a machine for turning 15-year-olds into tradesmen, year after year, at the company's expense. Then the 1970s arrived, and the men with clipboards did their sums. Australian shipbuilding survived on a government subsidy because Australian wages were honest wages, and the competition was building ships in Japan and later Korea for far less. Through the early 1970s, the official advice from the tariff and industry bodies in Canberra hardened into a single sentence. Shipbuilding is not economic. The subsidy was wound back, orders dried up, and the companies read the signal exactly as it was intended. In 1978, BHP closed the Whyalla shipyard. Nearly 2,000 jobs in a town of 33,000 people, gone with an announcement. Whyalla had been built around that yard. Men had come from Scotland, from Greece, from Italy, because the yard offered what the whole of old Australia offered: steady work, a house, and a trade for your sons. Evans Deakin in Brisbane had already stopped building ships by 1976. The State Dockyard at Newcastle was wound down and closed in 1987. Cockatoo Island, the oldest of them all, launched its last vessels and was shut in 1992 after more than a century of work. In one working lifetime, a nation girt by sea got out of the business of building ships almost entirely. Now here is the part the announcements never mentioned. When a shipyard closes, it does not just stop producing ships, it stops producing tradesmen. Every one of those yards had been pumping out dozens of freshly ticketed Boilermakers every single year. That production line of skill stopped the same day the gates shut. Nobody in Canberra replaced it, because on a spreadsheet, training does not exist until it is missing, and the yards were only the first blow. The second came for the heavy engineering shops that remained, and it came through the 1980s and 90s as tariffs fell and the big state utilities were broken up. The railway workshops, places like Everleigh in Sydney and Islington in Adelaide and Ipswich in Queensland, had trained metal tradesmen since the 1800s. They were run down and closed one by one. The electricity commissions and water boards, which each carried hundreds of apprentices as a matter of public duty, were corporatised and privatised, and the new owners cut training first, because an apprentice is a cost this year and a benefit in 4 years, and the new owners were not planning in 4 years. They were planning in quarters. The third blow was quieter, and in some ways the cruelest. It fell on the tech. The technical college, TAFE, was where every apprentice spent his day release, 1 day a week, learning theory from instructors who had done the job themselves. From the 1990s onward, TAFE budgets were squeezed in state after state. Courses were merged, workshops full of guillotines and rollers and welding bays were sold off because the floor space was worth money. Heavy fabrication courses need exactly that expensive floor space, so they were first against the wall. By the 2010s, entire regions of Australia had no local place left where a young person could be trained in heavy steel at all. Add the 3 blows together and the result was mathematical. The Boilermaker was not banned. He was simply never replaced. The blokes ticketed in the 60s and 70s kept the country running for decades on mine sites and refineries and workshops. Then they turned 60 and 65, and they retired, and behind them stood almost no one. The national skills bodies now list welders and metal fabrication trades in persistent shortage, year after year. The average age of the trade climbed into the 50s. When the country suddenly decided it wanted to build frigates and submarines again, the first problem was not money. It was that the men who knew how to weld a hull to survive the Southern Ocean had grey hair or headstones. Remember what a launch day was like, if you ever saw one. The whole town came, kids on shoulders, wives in their good dresses, the yard scrubbed up and the flags out. A ship the size of a city block, built by local hands from the keel up, sliding down the ways while the whistle screamed and grown men wiped their eyes and pretended it was the wind. That was not just industry. That was a town looking at itself and liking what it saw. There is no launch day for a distribution centre. There is no crowd on the foreshore when a new warehouse opens. The country did not just lose ships, it lost the days when work was worth cheering for. And look at what replaced the yards, because something did. The fly-in, fly-out economy, the same kind of man who once walked 10 minutes to the Whyalla yard, now sits in an airport at 4 in the morning, in company polo and steel caps, flying 3 hours to a site he will never bring his family to. 2 weeks on, 1 week off. Good money, no town, no launch days, no apprentice sweeping the floor beside him. The work still exists. The world the work built does not. That is the trade Australia made, and nobody was ever asked to vote on it. If you did your time in one of those yards or shops, you remember what the culture was. The first-year apprentice sweeping swarf and copying it from everyone. The tradesman who would belt your hand away from a machine before you lost a finger, then buy you a pie at Smoko and explain why. The test pieces. The night before your trade exam, the first pay packet as a ticketed man, real money, cash in a yellow envelope, and the quiet pride of your father at the kitchen table because his son had a trade, and a man with a trade could never be poor. That was the deal in old Australia. Serve your time, and the country will always need you. The country broke that deal, and it never once said so out loud. No minister ever stood up and announced the end of the Boilermaker. It was done sideways. A subsidy withdrawn in the 70s, a yard closed in 1978, a dockyard in 1987, another in 1992, a TAFE workshop auctioned in the 2000s, each decision defensible on its own page. All of them together, the deliberate dismantling of a trade that took a century to build. Both sides of politics held the pen at different times. Neither side ever picked up the phone to Whyalla and apologised. And the loss is not abstract. It is generational and it is permanent in the way that matters most. A trade is not stored in a library. It lives in hands and it is passed from one set of hands to the next, tradesman to apprentice, or it dies. Australia cut that chain, and a cut chain does not heal. You can fund a training program, and governments now announce them by the billion. But a program without 10,000 experienced tradesmen to stand next to is a brochure. The men who could have taught the next generation were sent home in 1978, and in 87, and in 92, and told the country had moved on. These stories are disappearing with the men who lived them, and putting them on the record is the whole point of this channel. So if your family carried a trade like this one, subscribing helps make sure it is not forgotten. Stand on the foreshore at Whyalla today, and you can still see where the slipways ran down to the Gulf. One of the last ships built there sits up on the grass as a museum piece. Tourists climb on it in the school holidays. Most of them have no idea they are looking at the tombstone of an Australian trade, in a town that once knew, better than anywhere, that a country serious about itself builds its own ships and trains its own sons. So here is the question for the comments, and it deserves an honest answer. Did you or your old man serve your time as a boilermaker, a welder, a metal tradesman? Which yard, which shop, which year? Write it down below, name and place, because the official records list closures and adjustment packages. They never list the trades that ended. That list only exists in the memories of the men who held the ticket. And it is worth more than anything filed in Canberra.